The Chosen People is sponsored by NetWell. Healthcare costs are rising, and it can feel overwhelming. But at NetWell, we believe there's a better way. Imagine being the part of a community, a family where people just like you share medical expenses. With NetWell, you get affordable care without the burden of surprise bills or sky-high premiums. We're more than traditional healthcare sharing. We offer access to trusted providers, telemedicine, dental, and mental health services. Your well-being is our priority, and we're here for you like family. Join the NetWell family today at netwell.com. Affordable care, trusted community, your health, your way.
Previously on The Chosen People.
You've drawn the attention of Pharaoh's officials. And because of that, we should be prepared to tell them, you're my sister, not my wife. This is for your protection as well as my own. If you've drawn the eye of a prominent Egyptian as your brother, my life would be spared.
So you'd lie?
It's not an outright lie. We do share a father.
Abram, you would tell a half-truth and deny me the protection of my husband? Lie to spare yourself and ship me off to an Egyptian warlord?
My name is Hagar. Is there anything else I can get you, Master?
Abram, has my servant piqued your interest? Consider her a part of my dowry, a gift for bringing me such a lovely wife.
She fumed that the only kindness her husband seemingly had to spare was for some stranger and not his own wife. Abram couldn't bring himself to fully admit what had happened in Egypt, certainly not to Sarai. Perhaps someday, but the failure still haunted him deeply.
And you speak often about your legacy and the nation you are building. I do not mean to overreach, but how do you plan to secure your line of inheritance without a son, or any children for that matter? Have you named an heir?
Abram, do not be anxious, and do not worry about the opinions of others. I have not forgotten about the promise I have made you.
God Most High, I know what you have promised me, but how?
Can you count the stars, Abram? You cannot, for there are too many. It is impossible. It is to be the same with your offspring. The great nation I shall make through your heir would be as innumerable as the stars in the night sky.
That night, under a canopy of stars and uncertainty, Sarai, despite her tears, felt comforted. Abram had failed her, but the God of Abram wouldn't.
Under the desert, searing sun, two women's lives intersected, and the seeds of destiny were sown in the soil of human sorrow. Shalom, my friends, from here in the Holy Land. I'm Yael Eckstein with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Welcome to the Chosen People. Each day we'll hear a dramatic story inspired by the Bible, stories filled with timeless lessons of faith, love, and meaning. Through Israel's story, we'll find this truth, that we are all chosen for something great. Take some time after this episode to follow and leave a review. These small steps ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps us get discovered. So let's begin. What happens when faith falters in the face of unfulfilled dreams? How do we reconcile the heartache of waiting and the urgency of desire? Can a sacred promise coexist with human impatience? In this dramatic and heart-wrenching story inspired by Genesis 16, we dive into the lives of Sarai and Hagar, two biblical women who represent our own struggle to cling on to God's promises and to trust in his plans.
Just a few years ago, only 3% of domestic violence shelters accepted pets, meaning many abuse survivors had to choose between staying in a difficult situation for their pet or leaving their pet behind. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience domestic abuse in their lifetime, and nearly half of survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina believes in the healing power of pets, particularly for survivors of abuse. They believe pets and people are better together, which is one of the many reasons they started the Purple Leash Project. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping break down one of the many barriers abuse survivors face: the lack of pet-friendly domestic violence shelters. Purina has helped increase the amount of pet-friendly shelters across the country from 3% to nearly 20% through the Purple Leash Project. With more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters, survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to get involved.
Need to shake up mealtime? Gorton Seafood has you covered with the most satisfying and convenient crunch this side of the freezer aisle. Bite into the golden crunch of their popcorn, butterfly, and southern-style shrimp. Or mix up any main course from tacos to salads with their irresistibly crispy beer-battered fillets and classic fish sticks. When it comes to easy prep, restaurant-quality flavor without the hefty price tag, nothing beats the fresh-tasting seafood Gorton's has brought to the table for 175 years. Visit Gortons.com to learn more.
When it comes to travel bags and backpacks, colorful and unique options are hard to come by. Luckily, Baboon to the Moon has you covered. Baboon to the Moon's bags are made for going places near and far, and for making you the brightest star at baggage claim. Made with super durable materials and a limited lifetime warranty, your Baboon to the Moon bag will join you for all of life's missed trains, unexpected rain showers, love at first sights, and compliments. Check them out at baboontothemoon.com. Now get lost and make the world more colorful.
Sarai's hands tremored slightly as she grasped the clay pitcher. Whether from age or pure apprehension, she was not sure. That morning, she had known. At daybreak, she opened her eyes to find the sun screaming through a jagged tear in the tent roof. She had watched the black goat hairs of the tent fabric slowly lose their luster and then deteriorate a little more each day until a slender seam began to form. She eyed the seam every morning and evening, wondering when it would finally burst open. And today, it finally happened. Yes, today was going to be the day. She felt the anxiety building in her bones and her patience unraveling like the fabric above her head. She could not let it go on a moment longer. Action had to be taken.
Hagar, come here.
Yes, my lady.
I must speak with my husband, but you are not dismissed yet. I will have need of you, so do not go far.
Yes, my lady.
10 years. That's what that hole in her tent had come to represent. These nomadic tents had become their home while they waited on a promise from Abram's God. Her God, too. She had seen his power when he rescued her from the hands of Pharaoh himself. But she wondered, as the walls around her began to crumble and her body steadily declined of old age, if there had been some kind of mistake. Was there some sign or direction they had missed along the way? Incalculable scores of descendants and possession of this land were what was promised to Abram, but a nagging suspicion had begun to worm its way into her mind. Was she to be a part of this grand design? Was she perhaps the roadblock? Was she the hold-up? The mistake? She pushed the thoughts away, stuffed them deep inside herself.
Lady Sarai, I received word that you sent for me.
Yes, Eliezer, I did. I would like you to intercept my husband before he makes plans to join his friends for dinner this evening. I would like him to dine with me. I must speak with him. This is very important, Eliezer.
Yes, Lady Sarai. I understand. I will do as you ask.
Sarai shakily set the pitcher down on the table and began gathering the cups and readying the table for their meal, losing herself once more in her brooding. Not having children had long set her apart. Other women simply didn't know what to talk to her about. Their whole worlds were oriented around their children, and men didn't quite know what to make of her either. She was the wife of a prominent clan leader, without the responsibilities of child-rearing to occupy her time. It was a life of solitude she had never asked for. She had even lost her reluctant companion in Lot's wife when they decided to settle miles away in Sodom. Even more than the loneliness of her life and station, the overwhelming feeling of inadequacy gnawed at Sarai. She had buried the wound of her infertility deep within herself long ago, but what she would never dare speak aloud was this: she had never felt like a whole person because of it. So she hid behind her mask of self-sufficiency and duty. She ran her household, honored her husband, and oversaw their affairs. She was the portrait of a Hebrew wife.
Lady Sarai, the meal is almost ready for you and Master Abram.
Thank you, Merat.
With nothing else to nervously fill her time, she began to pace the length of the tent back and forth. For 10 years she wondered at the promise spoken over their lives. Fear that she had done something wrong, or perhaps had not done enough, manifested a creeping doubt in her heart. Old insecurities clawed their way to the surface, refusing to stay where she had long ago locked them away. They ate away at her faith like the fraying of their tent. They demanded action. They gave her a sense of urgency, a need to take matters into her own hands. Maybe, just maybe, she had to be the one to fix it. She refused to be the cause of failure. She could not stomach this being her shortcoming. An idea had taken root, and the more she stewed on it, the more sure she felt.
Lady Sarai, I have found your husband. Will you be requiring anything else before I tell the servants you're ready for your meal?
No, thank you, Eliezer. That will be all.
Sarai, I am always honored to dine with you. But what's with all the urgency and formality? Are you well?
Abram, I have something I need to discuss with you.
Sarai paused as the servants brought in food and wine. She knew Abram could detect her nervousness immediately. After all, they had been married for over 50 years. But he respectfully held his silence and allowed her to take the time to prepare for what she had to say. Sarai only resumed her conversation with her husband once the servants were gone.
Abram, I have been giving this a lot of thought. It has been 10 years since we arrived in Canaan, and God has promised you a mighty legacy and possession of this land. You told me that He confirmed this promise in the most binding method of our culture, through covenant. You said that your offspring would come from your flesh and blood. I have never been able to conceive, and in the 10 years since we heard this promise, that hasn't changed.
Abram reached over the table to grasp her trembling hand. Abram's touch did not ease her discomfort. It had been 50 years of reassuring glances, squeezes of the hand, and words of affection. But never once did Abram ever say the words she desperately longed for. "You are enough for me." She swallowed, steeled herself, let go of her pride, and said,
I would have you achieve this promise another way. I would present my maid to you so that you could conceive a child with her. The child would be of your flesh and blood, and you would only have to adopt him as your heir. In that way, we would achieve God's promise to us. We could build our family through this child you would conceive with another.
Sarai, you would do that for us?
I would. It is the most logical path forward, and you would have the authority to make it so according to our laws.
Sarai watched as Abram considered her words. She knew the events in Egypt had affected him deeply. He had come very close to losing her entirely. He was as stubborn as she was in admitting his own failures. She supposed he found it easier to bury them as well. He had been doing his best to mend what had been lost. She could acknowledge that it had taken a great deal of time to walk back the trust between them. They had made progress, but Abram still seemed unsure at times about how to re-engage. and she, in turn, did not know what to tell him or where to begin.
Sarai, this offer is very generous. You have moved me greatly in your commitment to what our God has promised us. I will do what you have asked of me. I will accept.
Sharp pangs of emotion welled up unexpectedly from within her. This wasn't what she wanted. Yes, this was what she had planned, and she thought she had the resolve to see it through, but it wasn't until now that she realized she didn't want him to grant her this request, and so readily. She knew her suggestion was logical and strategic, but what she had failed to consider was her desperate desire for validation. To her great surprise, she realized at this moment that she craved comfort, the very thing she could not bring herself to ask for outright. All she wanted was for him to tell her that she was a whole person, with or without a child, that she was enough, promise or no promise of a legacy. These thoughts screamed at her from the depths of her very soul. She had tamped down those old hurts, but here they were, threatening to burst out of her at long last. She was right. She wasn't enough. Her husband's acceptance of her plan proved all her insecurities right. The realization stopped her in her tracks and rendered her silent. She had laid this trap for herself, and now she was snared like a rabbit. She had no choice but to go through with it. She could not now deny her husband the very solution he had been looking for. She could not fail him in this. She would not fail him in this. And so, she stayed silent. Hagar now stood before her lady and her master. She had never held an audience with them both before. She had been given to Abram in Egypt, and he, in turn, gave her to his wife Sarai. Hagar had been her maid ever since.
Abram, I present you with Hagar. As you once gave her to me as a gift, I now present her to you so that we may build our family.
Hagar blinked in surprise, but kept her head bowed politely. She peered up at her master and lady in the tense silence. This exchange seemed so formal, so restrained between them. Perhaps this was yet another strange custom these Hebrews held. Hagar had always found it strange that Abram had not taken an additional wife or concubine. She was equally surprised that Abram had not made advances toward her, as all her previous masters had done. All her life, Hagar had been a slave, and came to understand that nothing, not even her own body, was her own. Hagar barely remembered the village she came from, or even the faces of the parents who sold her. All she remembered was that they told her it was a great honor to be selected for Pharaoh. But even that honor had been taken away from her when she was given away without a second thought.
Hagar, you will go with my husband and lie with him until you conceive a child. I will relieve you of your duties until the child is born. The child you bear him will become our heir. Do you understand what I am asking of you?
Yes, my lady, I understand. As you command me, I will do as you ask.
And so Hagar did as her lady instructed. That very night she was escorted to her lord's tent. Her lady Sarai was there to open the entrance. As Hagar entered, she saw her lady's face illuminated by torchlight. Hatred was painted on the creases of her eyes. Was that hatred toward her, or perhaps to Abram? No. Hagar had lived in hollow palaces long enough to recognize a woman who hated herself. Her night with Abram was a gentle and brief affair. She was not abused or belittled. Amid it all, Hagar could not help but wonder if this was the beginning of something good for her. Perhaps she could be more than a slave.
Just a few years ago, only 3% of domestic violence shelters accepted pets, meaning many abuse survivors had to choose between staying in a difficult situation for their pet or leaving their pet behind. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience domestic abuse in their lifetime, and nearly half of survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina believes in the healing power of pets, particularly for survivors of abuse. They believe pets and people are better together, which is one of the many reasons they started the Purple Leash Project. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping break down one of the many barriers abuse survivors face: the lack of pet-friendly domestic violence shelters. Purina has helped increase the amount of pet-friendly shelters across the country from 3% to nearly 20% through the Purple Leash Project. With more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters, survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to get involved.
Need to shake up mealtime? Gorton Seafood has you covered with the most satisfying and convenient crunch this side of the freezer aisle. Bite into the golden crunch of their popcorn, butterfly, and southern-style shrimp. Or mix up any main course from tacos to salads with their irresistibly crispy beer-battered fillets and classic fish sticks. When it comes to easy prep, restaurant-quality flavor without the hefty price tag, nothing beats the fresh-tasting seafood Gorton's has brought to the table for 175 years. Visit Gortons.com to learn more.
Passport? Check. Charger? Check. 3 books you probably won't read? Check. A durable and colorful bag to stuff it all in? Meet Baboon to the Moon. Our colorful, technical bags are built for all the wild and weird places life takes you, whether it's a spontaneous trip or running from your boss's endless to-do list. With a limited lifetime warranty, your Baboon to the Moon bag is up for, well, everything you are. Find the perfect one for your next trip at baboontothemoon.com. Now get lost and make the world more colorful.
True to her word, Sarai relieved Hagar from her duties, ensuring that she would be looked after for the duration of her pregnancy. For the first time in Hagar's life, she had meals brought to her. She had someone else to mend and wash her clothes, and her living space was kept neat and clean. Most crucially, there was no one telling her what to do. To someone who had never had anything, this was everything. She felt significant. It gave her a glimpse into a future where she wasn't a slave to the whims of others. She began to dream of things that had never been accessible to her before: a family, and perhaps even a legacy of her own. If Abram and Sarai could hope for such a thing, why not her? Was she not bringing this about for them? In fact, they couldn't do this without her. If Abram could adopt her son, why could he not legitimize Hagar as well? Time passed, and the pains of pregnancy began. First, she noticed the fatigue. Hagar knew the tiredness that came from a long day of work, but this was a lethargy she had never known. But when the nausea began, she knew with certainty. As her belly grew, so did her resentment of Sarai. She hated that she would be denied the child growing inside of her. She hated that she would return to the life she had before. But most of all, she hated that Sarai would get everything she wanted and Hagar again would be left with nothing.
Good morning, Hagar. I received word that you are now showing.
I am, lady, as you can see.
Well, I came to see you and see how you are progressing.
I am how you see, lady. The babe grows each day.
And the midwife says the babe is healthy. Are you heeding everything she says?
Hagar's hatred of Sarai could be contained no longer. Sarai came to her and asked these questions and similar ones almost every day. Hagar's frustration at her fraught situation boiled over.
Am I nothing but a mare to you? To be broken and bred however you see fit? You will snatch this child of mine the moment it is free and claim it as your own. But why should you have a say at all? It is Abram who chose me. And it is I who was up to this task when you were not. Why should I not be rewarded?
With that, Hagar stormed off before Sarai could open her mouth to say a word. Hagar's words hung in the air moments after she left, and Sarai was rendered utterly speechless. Would this woman take her child? Would Abram, in fact, come to favor Hagar once she bore a child of his flesh? Fear surged through her veins and kicked up fury in its wake. Sarai had done the noble thing. She sacrificed her pride in granting her husband this path toward a child. And this was to be how she was to be repaid? Her anger crackled toward her husband. He had, without a moment's hesitation, set her aside. The boldness of her handmaiden could be dealt with later, but first, her husband. Sarai knew Abram would be heading out toward the fields today. She marched back to their tent and cornered him as he prepared to leave.
Abram.
Sarai, what's wrong?
Tell me the truth. Have you given Hagar any reason to believe that she may keep our child?
What? Of course not. Why would you ask me such a thing?
Have you told her that you prefer her to me?
Of course not. Where is this coming from? I've only done what you have asked me to do.
What I asked you to do. But oh, how quickly you agreed. Not a moment's hesitation for your wife, not one moment to consider why I asked you to do it or how I felt about it.
Sarai, you asked me to do this. Why would you ask this of me if you didn't want it? I wanted to please you, so I did what you requested of me.
Oh, is that why you did it? To please me? That is why you swiftly and gingerly took the slave to your bed? To please me? Sure, Abram.
But you were so sure. You were so bold and confident with this plan. How was I to know you were holding back your true feelings? Was it a trap you laid for me? I've been trying desperately to be a better husband, a better man. For you! I was moved that you were so invested in the promise our God made us. I thought this would make you happy. This business with Hagar will give us a child at last.
No, Abram. This business with Hagar will give you a child. It's your child, your promise, your legacy, your divine calling with some God I have yet to hear from. Perhaps in the midst of it all, I would have a consolation prize, a husband who loves me and won't ship me off to Pharaoh or leave me into the arms of some slave.
Sarai, I am not leaving you. I am not...
Whatever kindness you have shown this woman has made her hate me and desire you. This woman who should have been our ally has become my enemy. She hates me. You agreed to this plan, so I hold you responsible. What I had hoped would help has only come back to harm me. May God judge between me and you.
Sarai, these are strong words. You give me no choice but to give you justice. Do what you please with the girl. You can decide what is to be done with her.
Sarai turned on her heel and left their tent. Satisfaction was not complete in her eyes, not even close, but at least she would have her justice. She found Hagar and confronted her, rage roaring in her ears.
You there, Hagar. How dare you speak to me as you did earlier? Who do you think you are?
You have given your husband to me, and I have done what you could not. Why should my station not be elevated? Who is to say that Abram will not decide between us?
I am your lady, and you are mine to do with as I please. Even the child growing inside you is mine to do with as I please. I have given you nothing. You are nothing.
Sarai struck Hagar with her final words. Hagar fell to the ground, and Sarai felt the leash on her anger slip even further as she continued her assault on a defenseless Hagar. Over and over again she yelled,
You are nothing! You are nothing! You are nothing!
Sarai was too enraged to know if she was yelling these insults at Hagar or herself. Panting and exhausted, Sarai finally collapsed to her knees, trembling. The air between the two women was still taut like the string on a bow. Hagar winced as she uncurled herself from the protective ball she had formed around her head and pregnant belly. She peered up at Sarai, tears brimming in her eyes. Sarai was still panting and glaring at her, but still as death. Hagar tentatively propped herself up with her elbow, weighing how Sarai would respond to her movement. Sarai stared at her in lethal silence, but didn't move to strike or stop her. Hagar pushed herself to her feet, shaking. Sarai watched her, but made no movement. Sensing this may be her only opportunity, Hagar turned and stumbled away as quickly as she could. She did not want to allow her lady time to change her mind. Hagar broke into a limping run as she fled from Abram and Sarai's camp. She had no plan and nowhere to go, but instinctively ran east toward Egypt. Sarai stared after Hagar for a long while, until her limping figure disappeared from view on the horizon. When she was gone, regret and shame flooded Sarai, flushing out her fury. She hated Hagar. She hated Abram. But most of all, she hated herself. Hagar staggered along the road to shore on the way to Egypt. She had covered miles and miles since her confrontation with Sarai. Black and purple bruises flecked with a yellowy green began rising from her skin where Sarai had struck her. She wandered with nothing but the clothes on her back. Her stomach growled and her throat was dry. She hoped she would happen upon travelers who would take pity on her and give her shelter and protection. But she had seen no one on the road since she fled that morning. Thirst buzzed in the back of her mind like a pest, and even the dull, throbbing headache could not be quieted. She saw a modest spring up ahead off the road and quickened her pace. She carefully navigated the steep drop off the road to access the trickling water. She protectively held her belly as she sidestepped down the hill. She collapsed to her knees, cupped her hands, and greedily drank the water from the stream. After several gasping gulps of water, she realized how quiet the world around her had become. The insects, birds, and even the breeze around her had ceased. She looked over her shoulder, up toward the road, and beheld an otherworldly being staring at her. She yelped in surprise and fell backward, catching herself on her elbows.
Hagar, you do not know me, but you know the God of Israel I serve. I come to you now on his behalf.
Hagar was too stunned to say anything and dumbly gaped at the figure. The messenger came down the hill and stretched out his hand to Hagar. The gesture was so kind and so human that despite the messenger's appearance, Hagar hesitantly took his hand, and he helped her to her feet.
Hagar, tell me, where do you come from, and where are you going?
How is it that you know my name?
I know many things. You come from Egypt, and you are a handmaiden to Sarai. But now I ask you, so tell me, where did you come from, and where are you going?
I am running away from my lady, Sarai.
The messenger smiled at Hagar. He seemed to take in her measure. Hagar knew she should probably be afraid, but she was struck by the kindness of his presence. She could sense power as well, great power, but she knew instinctively that no harm would come to her.
Hagar, the God I spoke of, I am here to speak to you on his behalf. He would have me tell you two things. First, I would ask something of you. You are to go back to your lady and submit to her authority.
Hagar's eyes widened at this, but the messenger continued.
Second, I would give you something.
Hagar's heart leaped. To be given anything by such a figure of authority, she sucked in her breath.
The God Most High will give you a great family. He will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count. The child growing in your womb now will be a son. You are to name him Ishmael. The God Most High has seen everything that has happened to you. He has heard both the longings of your heart and seen the abuse that has befallen you.
Hagar started at that. She was humbled to have drawn the attention of Abram's God.
I will tell you more about the son you will bear, Ishmael. When he grows to be a man, he will be like a wild donkey. His hands will be against everyone, and everyone's hands will be against him.
Hagar did not understand the full meaning of what the messenger was telling her, but she assumed that she would come to understand in time.
His great family will be settled from Havilah to Shur, and they will all be together.
Hagar was amazed at the words of the messenger. She wondered at the power and authority of his God.
I am honored that you would come to me, that your God even knows who I am. You have said his name is God Most High, and I have called him the God of Abram. But now I will give him a new name. Your God has seen me, something so few have done. So I would call him El Roi, the God who sees.
Hagar did as the messenger of El Roi, as she named him, bid. She returned to her lady Sarai and submitted herself to her authority. Sarai's anger had simmered, and an icy indifference settled in its place. She took Hagar back into her care to await the child's birth, but the rift between the women had been set. Abram had struggled with his decision as to what to do in the conflict between his wife and the would-be mother of his child. When Hagar ran away due to Sarai's harsh dealings with her, Abram was overcome with guilt. He felt that he had failed again. He cried out to his God about what to do or how to proceed. But when Hagar returned, he rejoiced and took it as a sign that he was to continue with the plan to adopt the child as his heir. When the day finally came for Hagar to bear her son, she sent word to Abram about the name.
Sarai, I received word that you sent for me. Lady Sarai, I received...
That's wonderful news, Eliezer. Thank you.
I understand. I will do as you ask. Yes,
What is it?
Lady Sarai, I have found your husband. Will you require...
What did you say?
Will you require anything else before I tell the servants you're ready for your meal? Will you requiring anything else before I tell the servants you're ready for your...
The name means God hears.
Abram wondered at the name. He had thought that everything had been set right and that his God was affirming his decision. How strange that this significant name would come through the woman he and his wife had treated so badly. Abram could not shake the feeling that in taking matters into their own hands, they had indeed fallen short.
Just a few years ago, only 3% of domestic violence shelters accepted pets, meaning many abuse survivors had to choose between staying in a difficult situation for their pet or leaving their pet behind. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience domestic abuse in their lifetime, and nearly half of survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina believes in the healing power of pets, particularly for survivors of abuse. They believe pets and people are better together, which is one of the many reasons they started the Purple Leash Project. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping break down one of the many barriers abuse survivors face: the lack of pet-friendly domestic violence shelters. Purina has helped increase the amount of pet-friendly shelters across the country from 3% to nearly 20% through the Purple Leash Project. With more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters, survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to get involved.
Need to shake up mealtime? Gorton Seafood has you covered with the most satisfying and convenient crunch this side of the freezer aisle. Bite into the golden crunch of their popcorn, butterfly, and southern-style shrimp. Or mix up any main course from tacos to salads with their irresistibly crispy beer-battered fillets and classic fish sticks. When it comes to easy prep, restaurant-quality flavor without the hefty price tag, nothing beats the fresh-tasting seafood Gorton's has brought to the table for 175 years. Visit Gortons.com to learn more.
Hitting the road to escape your situationship? Time to replace them with something that actually has your back. At Baboon to the Moon, we're all about colorful, durable bags that take your getaway to the next level. With a limited lifetime warranty, these durable, endlessly schleppable travel bags make hauling across the airport somehow fun. These bags are built for every adventure and misadventure life throws your way. Find your next adventure-ready bag at baboontothemoon.com. Now get lost and make the world more colorful. And don't forget to text your mom when you get there.
When I first heard the story of Sarai and Hagar, I was struck by its raw humanity. Here we have Sarai, a woman with deep, aching desires, longing for a child, a legacy, and the love of her husband. And then there's Hagar, a servant caught in the middle of someone else's desperation. The whole narrative feels so raw. It feels so human. I feel the weight of Sarai's hope turned to despair. Her dream is tangled in frustration. I feel Hagar's confusion and fear thrust into a role she never even wanted. And through it all, I feel God's presence, not absent in the entire messy situation, but intimately involved. God heard Hagar's cries. God felt Sarai's pain. This story, with all of its imperfections and struggles, reminds me that God is there for us, not only in the easy times, but in the messy times, despite our humanity and our brokenness. Now let's take a moment to explore the significance of Sarai and Hagar's names that are rich with meaning and insight. First, there's Sarai, which in Hebrew means my princess. Her name evokes images of nobility, royal bearing, and someone destined for greatness. Sarai carries the promise of what is to come, the lineage of kings. But let's look a little closer. A princess holds great potential, but often has to wait for her kingdom and her future. Sarai's journey is marked by this tension between the future promise of royalty and the present reality of barrenness. Sarai is a woman caught between what is and what will be, struggling to hold on to faith in the face of long years of waiting. She's been promised that she will be a mother of the nations, but the promise has yet to be fulfilled. Sarai is caught in the in-between, and that is where so many human mistakes can be made, in the margin between God's future promises and our current suffering. Then we have Hagar, whose name literally in Hebrew means flight. Her name tells a story of movement, of escape, of a journey from one place to another. Hagar is the embodiment of displacement, of being uprooted, of being cast into uncertainty. In flight, Hagar navigates the harsh realities of her existence, finding herself seen by God in the wilderness. It is in these names that we can understand the depth of their personal stories and what they're coming to teach us. Why are we so impatient? Why do we struggle with waiting? In our fast-paced world, we're often told to take control, to make things happen through our own strength and on our own terms. But all too often, God's timing doesn't fit our schedules or our plans. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint." Waiting on God isn't passive, it's active. And it's about trust. It's about surrendering our timeline to God. And when we wait, we are acknowledging that God is God. He is perfect, and, well, we are not. Just like Sarai, we face a choice to take matters into our own hands or to trust in God's perfect timing. I know, it's easier said than done. But remember, God's promises are never late. They are always right on time. And while we wait for him, God works on us and in us, preparing us for what's to come. But aside from what Sarai and Hagar's story tells us about our relationship with God, it also looks at some pretty profound moral and ethical issues. Abraham and Sarai's use of Hagar is a stark reminder of how humans often treat each other in their quest for what they believe is right. Think about it. Sarai offers Hagar to Abraham, not considering Hagar's voice, choice, or dignity. Hagar, a servant, finds herself used, her body a means to an end. It's a disturbing glimpse into the human tendency to use others for personal gain. And it's not just an issue from the Bible. No, from the days of servants and enslavement, from times when such actions were more common, these same human tendencies are very much alive and well today, unfortunately. We see such actions everywhere, in the corridors of power, in the workplace, in our communities, and sometimes even in our homes. Humans have a dark tendency to exploit others while pursuing their own selfish goals, convinced that the ends justify the means. Sarai and Abraham's actions, while driven by a deeply personal and painful longing, crossed ethical boundaries. They inflicted harm on Hagar, causing strife and suffering. We would expect more from our matriarchs and patriarchs, don't you think? The great men and women of the Bible should be better examples, no? But as we've already seen throughout Genesis, Jewish tradition doesn't consider our patriarchs and matriarchs to have been perfect, although they did exist on a much higher level, and they were directly connected to God. They were also imperfect, just like us. And as this story about great people acting not so greatly points out our human imperfections, it also asks us to look at those who, like Hagar, feel used, feel discarded, and feel voiceless. This story reminds us both that we, even though we're imperfect, could still have a connection to God that's deep and real and meaningful. And it also reminds us of our call to see and treat every person as an image bearer of God, deserving of dignity and respect. Because even as Hagar was mistreated, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob saw her in distress. He didn't turn his eyes. When Hagar fled into the wilderness feeling used and abandoned, God actually went to meet her there. God saw Hagar and he called her by name. God's tenderness towards Hagar is a powerful reminder of his heart for the marginalized, the used, and the abused. It shows us that no one is beyond his sight or care. In the vast expanse of human suffering, God's compassion reaches out to those who feel most forgotten. The very same people who the fellowship works each day to help, to bring food to and say, you're not alone. We do that here in the Holy Land, across the former Soviet Union, and anywhere around the world where God's people need help. We help over 2 million people a year who feel alone, and we tell them, God has not abandoned you nor forgotten you, and either have we. There was a teacher from Nazareth who understood these principles that we see in Genesis 16. And to speak more on that is our good friend, Bishop Paul Lanier.
Thank you, Yael. You've done such a masterful job speaking to this chapter 16. Can you believe I can barely get past verse 1? Because it's unfortunately such a common anguish for some women and couples to suffer. It says that Sarah could not conceive. She could not become pregnant. You look back at the book of Genesis when God speaks to Eve and he prophesies through her and says that ultimately deliverance is going to come through pregnancy, through conception, through a child, a baby whose heel will be pressed against the enemy's head and crush him. And God had spoken prophetically to this 75-year-old Abraham and 65-year-old Sarah that through them would come a nursery. And to the Christians listening now, you understand that through the nursery would come the nation of Israel. And through the nation would come Jesus. And through Jesus would come his church, and through his church the ultimate manifestation of his kingdom. But we can't get out of verse 1. She can't conceive, and it's a tragic motif or theme we keep running into in this covenant conversation, where Rebekah and Isaac couldn't conceive, and Jacob and his Rachel could not conceive, and Hannah, and we get over to the Christian scriptures of the New Testament, and Elizabeth in her old age, and her husband in his old age had wanted a child, and they couldn't conceive. And in each one of these situations, their husband caressed them, embraced them. Their husband poured their own flesh, seeded themselves into their wife, and still their bodies betrayed them, and they could not conceive. And so I'm thinking, sitting here now, about something miraculous over in the Christian scriptures of a young Jewish girl named Mary. The Bible says that no man touched her, no man had embraced her, caressed her, no man had seeded his own flesh into her, but miraculously she conceived and brought forth her son and laid him in a manger. We know his name to be Jesus. That whole scenario, I can't conceive though I've been touched. And Mary, I have conceived, yet no man has touched me. The miracle. And I would say to those who are Christian, who believe in Jesus, the only thing more miraculous than the virgin birth is the new birth. Almighty God, I thank you for the miraculous in your covenant conversations with your people in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Christian scriptures, and that all of us who believe in this one God of Israel, we rest in you, in the promises you've spoken, and we know that with God, all things are possible.
In the tension between the now and the not yet, let's remember to trust. In the tension between the ends and the means, let's remember justice. In the tension between the known and the unknown, let's remember to seek peace. Here's a final blessing for you. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Yair Hashem panav elecha v'chonecha, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen.
You can listen to The Chosen People with Yael Eckstein ad-free by downloading and subscribing to the pray.com app today. This pray.com production is only made possible by our dedicated team of creative talents. Steve Katina, Max Bard, Zach Schellebarger, and Ben Gammon are the executive producers of The Chosen People with Yael Eckstein, edited by Alberto Avila, narrated by Paul Coltofianu. Characters are voiced by Jonathan Cotton, Aaron Salvato, Sarah Seltz, Mike Reagan, Stephen Ringwald, Sylvia Zaradok, and the opening prayer is voiced by John Moore. Music by Andrew Morgan Smith, written by Bree Roseley and Aaron Salvato. Special thanks to Bishop Paul Lanier, Caleb Burrows, Jocelyn Fuller, and the team at International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. You can hear more Pray.com productions on the Pray.com app, available on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. If you enjoyed The Chosen People with Yael Eckstein, please rate and leave a review.
Need to shake up mealtime? Gorton Seafood has you covered with the most satisfying and convenient crunch this side of the freezer aisle. Bite into the golden crunch of their popcorn, butterfly, and southern-style shrimp. Or mix up any main course from tacos to salads with their irresistibly crispy beer-battered fillets and classic fish sticks. When it comes to easy prep, restaurant-quality flavor without the hefty price tag, nothing beats the fresh-tasting seafood Gorton's has brought to the table for 175 years. Visit Gortons.com to learn more.
Hitting the road to escape your situationship? Time to replace them with something that actually has your back. At Baboon to the Moon, we're all about colorful, durable bags that take your getaway to the next level. With a limited lifetime warranty, these durable, endlessly schleppable travel bags make hauling across the airport somehow fun. These bags are built for every adventure and misadventure life throws your way. Find your next adventure-ready bag at baboontothemoon.com. Now get lost and make the world more colorful. And don't forget to text your mom when you get there.
Wake up at Holiday Inn Express to a can't-miss breakfast that's free with every stay. Count on all the hot, fresh coffee you need and an incredible breakfast buffet that has something for everyone, like eggs, cinnamon rolls, and even hot, fresh pancakes with all the toppings you crave. Next time, do yourself a favor and stay at a Holiday Inn Express with a can't-miss breakfast that's free with every stay. So, when you wake up at Holiday Inn Express, you'll wake up happy. A part of IHG Hotels and Resorts.